excuse me. I started in 14. Let me skip to 15. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven, and sat on the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. Amen. Well, I'm so thrilled that Brother Arthur and Linda got to go to India. I'm really glad that Linda got to go, because she's never been. And you know, Brother Arthur, actually, when I was going over there all the time, Brother Arthur came over to India 5 different times, and I actually took him all over India. And you know, it was so amazing, because he didn't know these people. They were from the other side of the world. They were a different nationality. And I'd take him into a church, and he'd preach, but he would start calling them up there, and he'd start prophesying to them. And I mean, he'd go down the line. I mean, it was amazing. And he was a great blessing. But I'm more thrilled than I can possibly tell you that Linda got to go. And I know she's going to come back changed. I know it. Not that she needs to change, but I mean, it's going to affect her life. And I'm excited. I need to just lay them down. I don't think I need them. But now, I met Brother Francis and his wife. I can't remember what year it was, but Brother Arthur was with me on that particular time, and I had gone to a place that I never had been before, and we met them, and while we were visiting with them, Brother Arthur washed Brother Francis's feet. And it was beautiful. But today, I'm just going to kind of tell you my life story. And I'll try not to be too long. But I'm going to start way back. It was, my parents lived in Arkansas. We lived in a house that my dad actually built. He built it after I was born. I can remember when he was building it. And I was, my brother and sister had walked down the road. There was a church at the, kind of down the road. I mean, it kind of slanted down to a highway that came out of the little town of Ozark, Arkansas. I ended up graduating in Ozark, Arkansas, and we were Ozark hillbillies, if you can imagine. But anyway, my brother and sister had gone down. There was a church down, just down the road, less than a quarter of a mile away. And there was a school on one side of the road and a church on the other side. It was a Presbyterian church, but it was shared by the Baptists. And the the Presbyterian pastor in the little town of Ozark, which was 5 miles down the road. The Presbyterian pastor would come out one Sunday, and then the Baptist pastor would come out. They would switch back and forth, and they shared our church with their own church, because they'd preach at our church one Sunday and at their own church, the following Sunday. But at this particular time, there was a Baptist evangelist that was just passing through. His name was Brother Crossland. I distinctly remember it. And remember, this was 1947. I was 5 years old. And it was springtime. And my parents were sitting in the backyard. That was before the days of air conditioners. And definitely before the days of computers. But we were sitting in the backyard, and my brother and sister had walked down to the church, and they came home, and they were, my brother, he was 7 years older than me, and my sister was 3 years older than me, and they came home, and they were telling my parents that they had gotten saved. Well, I knew enough to know that if you got saved, that would make it possible for you to go to heaven. And when they were telling my parents that they had gotten saved, it absolutely terrified me. And I thought, oh no, if I die tonight, I'll go to hell, and all my family will go to heaven. And so, but anyway, as they were talking to my parents, they said, oh, by the way, Mary Ann, tomorrow morning, he's going to have a kids meeting, and you should go down there and go. So the next morning, I'm telling you, I was up before the break of day, and I was on my way. As soon as I got dressed, I was running down that road to get saved. I was going for one purpose, to get saved. And now this evangelist, like I said, he was Baptist. His name was Brother Crossland, and so anyway, I went down there, and I thought, oh, is this preacher ever going to quit preaching so I can go get saved? He finally finished his message, and then he gave an altar call, and then I was in that altar, and I wept my way to salvation. I mean, you would have thought I was the worst sinner in the world. But anyway, I was 5, so I couldn't have been into too much trouble yet. But anyway, I'm just telling you, that beginning. And then I'd like to skip way ahead in my life. A little ways anyway. I was 11. And my dad had a farm, and he had cut the hay. And back in those days, he didn't have a hay baler, and so he let the hay dry out, and for 2 or 3 days, and then he was going to put it into a haystack. And so my brother and sister, they were somewhere else and nowhere to be found. So he said, Mary Ann, would you go with me to the hayfield? And so I went with him, and he had me to pack the hay down when he would toss it up on the haystack. He had put a pole down in the ground, packed it real solid, and then he just stacked all the hay, and I'd pack it down, and so it ended up being a haystack. And it took us 2 or 3 hours to get all that done. And then he said, Marianne, why don't you go to the shade tree? I've got some more things I need to do. So I gladly went to the shade tree. And the truck was parked under the shade, and we had a big jug of water. And so I got me a good drink, and then I was sitting on the tailgate of the truck. And I was just sitting there, and we had just recently had some missionaries in our church, and I was praying for them. And then, very clearly, I heard the Lord speak to me. And he said, Marianne, someday I'm going to send you to the nations. And I knew from that moment, I was 11, and from that moment, I knew that one day I'd be a missionary. Now, I didn't know how it could come about, but I did know that I knew that I was supposed to be a missionary. Well, I grew up there. We lived in that house, and Ozark was just 5 miles down the road. They had a high school, and so when I got through grade school, I would ride the bus to school, and I went to Ozark High School. And by the way, our mascot was hillbillies. We were the Ozark Hillbillies. Can you imagine? But anyway, I grew up there, and I don't know if you could even say I was an average student. I didn't make real good grades, but I did make it through school. And after I got out of high school, I got a job at a restaurant in town, and I worked there for a couple of years. And also I helped my parents on the farm, because in the meantime, my dad had started raising turkeys, and he would get them at when they were just baby turkeys right after they hatched, and we'd take them through that stage, and then as they grew, and then he would eventually put them out on the range. That's what they called it. When they got real big, great big turkeys, well, he'd put them out on the range. And but when he put them out on the range, he couldn't put them behind a fence that was drawn tight, because if there was any kind of noise, turkeys will pile up and they smother all of them that are on the bottom. So he had to have a loose fence. Well, this one day, a plane flew over. It flew low for some reason or other. And it scared those turkeys, and they all piled up, and the fence completely collapsed. And so, oh my gracious, you can't drive turkeys. It took us hours to get those turkeys back in. But anyway, I decided right then I don't want to raise turkeys when I grow up. But anyway, I'm going to skip ahead now. And now, after a while, my mother and dad started attending the Assembly of God Church in the town of Ozark. It was, like I said, 5 miles. And so we started going to church there. And then I grew up, and, I attended that church all of my growing up years. And then after I got out of high school, I got a job as a waitress in one of the little restaurants. And I worked there for a couple of years, and plus I helped my parents with the turkeys. And then we had a pastor come when I was a senior, and they had a daughter that was close to my age, but she was a grade behind me. Well, I graduated from high school, and I got a job, and I worked for a year, and then she graduated the following year, and she worked for a year. And then that summer after she had worked that year, the pastor and his wife, their relatives lived in Southern California, in Covina, California. And so they were planning on taking a 2-week vacation. And so they asked me if I'd like to go with them. Well, of course, I would love to go with them. And so I did. And we arrived there on a Saturday night. And her grandparents told us that they were having a youth meeting at the church. And so we walked, it was just a block away, so we walked to the church, and they had built a stage out on the sidewalk. And most young people didn't have their own cars back in those days. And so people were just walking up and down, mostly young people were walking up and down the streets. And so we had this meeting out there, and, you know, on this platform we had music and everything. And so people just started coming up. And as it turned out, many of those young people accepted the Lord that night. And we got real involved that 2 weeks that we were there. Some of the young people she knew took us to the beach. I'd never been to the beach. And, you know, we just had a wonderful time. And then after our 2 weeks were over, we headed back to Arkansas. And on the way back, she and I were in the back seat talking, and she said, you know, Marianne, I would love to move back out to California. Would you be interested? And I said, sure, I would love to move to California. So we talked to our parents, and they said, okay, if that's what you want to do. And so in a few weeks, we got on a train. It took us 3 days by train to go from Arkansas to California. And we arrived in Los Angeles at the, train station. And one of her aunts picked us up and took us back. And we lived with her grandparents for a little bit. But almost immediately, I went with one of the ladies. She told me that there was a place hiring a factory. And so I went with her when she went to work, and I just walked over to this other factory, and they put me right to work. And so anyway, my friend, she was trying to get an office job, but it wasn't quite as easy in California as it was in Arkansas to get a job for a lawyer, those types of things. But anyway, she ended up coming to that same factory and working. But they had put me in a brand new department, and it was called the coil department. We wound coils, and this older man and his son had done this for years, and then this company had put them, to work there, and I was the first person that they hired into that department. I ended up working in that department for 5 years, and that department grew so big they had to move it across the street, and it was in a huge building. And I trained 50 or 60 ladies, all the things about working, winding the coils and everything. But anyway, I worked for that company for 5 years. But that year that we moved out there, we had moved at Christmas time. Let me think. No, we had gone out there. We had gone out there, in the summer, and we had worked and up until Christmas. And then her parents, and then my mom also, came with them, and they came out there for Christmas. But by that time, she and the youth pastor had been dating all that time, and they got married. So, and I was in their wedding. And before they left Arkansas, my dad told my mom, he said, "Now, I don't mind you going out there, but don't you dare try to talk her into coming back to Arkansas. She's welcome to come back if she wants to, but don't try to talk her into it. Let her make that decision." So my mom let me make the decision, and I wanted to stay. And so I continued working in that, in that same place. And like I said, the company grew, and within a year, I was the lead lady, and I trained 40 or 50 people to do that, to do all the parts to that job. But that was good for me. And but anyway, I had been working there from the time that we got back to California, and then at Christmas time, this young man who was in Bible school, and I had met him at Christmas, but he got out of Bible college, and he came back to the town, and he asked me to marry him. So anyway, as time went on, it was in May. He and I got married in the church there in Covina, and my mom came for the wedding, and my, the pastor and his wife, they came, and my dad didn't come because he didn't travel well, because he had a hearing problem, and it really gave him a hard time to travel. But anyway, he was totally with me. And anyway, we got married in May. And when my husband asked me, he asked me at Christmas time, all the youth in the church had gone up into the mountains to Big Bear Mountain. I think that's the name of the mountain. And he asked me if I would marry him. And when he asked me to marry him, he said, "Now, I can't promise you a nice house or a nice car. As a matter of fact, if you marry me, you may end up in a mud hut in the middle of the jungle." Well, I didn't end up in a mud hut, but I ended up in the middle of the jungle, and I've been in many mud huts. But anyway, he got out of Bible college in May, and we went back to Arkansas and got married, and and then we visited a lot of churches, some churches in California, because that's how missionaries make it to the field. Churches give them offerings. Well, we didn't do so good in California. So I said, "Let's go back to Arkansas." I said, "I know a lot of pastors." And so we went back to Arkansas, and I'm telling you, okay, there had been a missionary, J.W. Tucker. He had been killed in the Congo. He was from Arkansas. He was just from down the road from me, about 15 miles, was where he grew up. And so everybody in Arkansas knew Brother Tucker. And when they had killed him, did I tell you how they killed him? They had taken him captive, and they had made the Catholic Church the jailhouse. The nun was there, and she told us, but she said that these Simbas, and I've got a picture back there on that table of these Simbas. They in the Congo there's this drug that grows wild, and they were getting really high on this drug, and they had feathers in their in a thing around their head, and I mean they were just wild, and they were going through Congo, and when they killed Brother Tucker, they just laid him on the floor. They tied his hands above his head, and they just took this pole that was flat on the bottom, and they just went down his spine and crushed his spine all the way down, and then, they took him out to the river and dumped him in the river to the crocodiles. So anyway, this had happened, but they wanted somebody that could go back in and take a whole print shop in. And like I said, it was before the days of computers. But my husband had worked on a job since he was just a young teenager. He worked for the newspaper, and he had learned everything there was to know about printing, and he knew he was called to be a missionary. And so anyway, when we got our missions appointment, we got it in Arkansas. We went to the Arkansas, and the man that was in charge knew me, and so he gladly gave us a missions appointment, and we went all over Arkansas. We went to every Assembly of God church in Arkansas practically, and the people just, they knew Brother Tucker, so they gladly helped us. And it didn't take us very many months to raise enough money, because we had to raise enough money to live there for 4 or 5 years. I mean, 4 years was the amount. We ended up living there 6 years, but we needed enough money to get us there and to get us back, but we also needed enough money monthly to help us live. So that happened. Arkansas just opened the doors. I mean, we had services every single night of the week and all over Arkansas. And we were ready in less than a year. I mean, just a few months. And we got all ready, and then we had to also have enough money to get furniture once we got over there. Well, that was just so easy in Arkansas. And within 9 months, we were on our way, and we were, my parents took us to New York, and we went by ship. People didn't fly very much in those days. That's been a long time ago. And we got on this ship. It was called the SS United States. It was a huge ship. It was 3 stories high. But at that time, I was pregnant with my second child. And let me tell you, I was sick. Now, this ship, they served meals that were exotic. My husband and my son, who was 5, they would eat these awesome meals. I would go to the dining hall, and I would barely make it back to the room. I'd be so sick. Just the smell of food. And I think I maybe ate 1 or 2 meals. It took us 5 days to go to Le Havre, France. We got there, we got off the ship, and then we got a taxi to Rome, and then we got a train to Switzerland, and we were in Switzerland for over a year learning French, and I, as I said, I was pregnant, so not long after we were in Switzerland, my daughter Jennifer was born. So I had a son from America and a daughter from Switzerland, and then eventually we made it through, our learning French, and we went to Congo, Africa, because we were going in to replace this missionary that had been killed. And so I remember the day that we flew into Kinshasa, the capital of Congo. I mean, we'd been up in those Swiss Alps mountains, beautiful, wonderful weather, and we stepped off of that plane in Congo, and it was so hot. I mean, it just almost took your breath away. Well, we had our papers. We had to get all of our papers cleared. It took us a few days, and then we got a small plane up to Isiro. The name of the town had been Polis before, when this other missionary had been killed. But we finally made it up there, and there were two ladies there, and they really were in need to go on a furlough, go back home for a while. So as soon as we got there, they went back to the States, and my husband and I went in, and he completely set up a whole print shop. Now, that's totally different than what it's like today. Nothing like having a computer, I mean, the typesetting machine that I did the typesetting, and, you'd type a line, and then you'd type it a second time, each line like that. The second time you typed it, it would put it in a column. And, it was a slow process, and plus the fact that, I had a little girl and a young boy. But I taught our oldest boy, I taught him first and second grade, and then we sent him to a mission school, a little mission, it was all the missionaries got together, and they had a school up in the hills, which was cooler. The place was called Raby. So we took him up to Raby and let him live there. 3 times a year he would go up and stay. And so, then I after we were there in Congo, I got pregnant again, and so when he came home for Christmas holiday, he said, "Now I know I'm going to have a baby brother, and I want you to name him Tommy." Well, sure enough, in February, right at the beginning of February, we called the mission plane. He came up and picked us up and flew us down to the hospital, which was a long ways away. We flew over the jungle for a long ways to get down to this place where a hospital was. And I can remember it so clearly because we spent the night with the doctor in an upstairs room, and then the next morning we got up, had breakfast, and she drove us down in her truck to the hospital, and we went in this building. It was probably twice as long as this part of the church, but it was about, I don't know, it wasn't very wide. It was wide enough to have cots on each side, and we walked right down the middle. And here were these ladies getting ready to have babies. All the way down. I went down and went into the delivery room. The doctor induced labor, and Tommy was born. And we, our other son had already told us at Christmas time, "I'm going to have a brother, and his name's going to be Tommy." So we named him Tommy. And I actually named him Thomas Darren, but we called him Tommy. We still call him Tommy. And anyway, here I had now 3 children that had been born on 3 different continents. And We stayed there uh, until the other missionaries, got ready to come back. And I'm going to have to sit down. I I think I need a chair. If y'all don't mind, I just can't stand on my feet.
Sit right here.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
here. All right.
Let me get my. I don't know if I'll look at any of these notes. I probably couldn't find my place if I did. But anyway, let's see, where was I? We we finished we finished our time in Congo, and the other missionaries came back, and then um, but we still had time. You know, it wasn't time for us to go home yet. So they asked us if I mean if we if we minded to stay a little longer, and um, before we went back home. So um, we did, um, and then they sent us to South Africa to finish out our time, and we drove from Congo, from Kinshasa, I think it's Kinshasa, Congo. We drove 6,000 miles down to South Africa, and it took us 6 weeks. And here we started out on that trip with a 2-month-old baby, and a 3-year-old girl, a little girl, and then a 5-year-old boy. And we went to South Africa, and we spent 2 more years in South Africa to finish out our time. And but that trip down to South Africa, it was an amazing trip, because we went through several countries, and it was not easy to get through these countries. And on one occasion, we was going through this large city, and there was lots of people walking in the streets, but there was also lots of vehicles. And there was this delivery truck, and he ran a red light, and he hit us in the side. Here's our truck, our camper's on the back. All of us were sitting in the front, and we had a bunch of stuff tied down on top of our camper, that we were taking from Congo down to South Africa. And we literally, this truck hit us in the side. I was sitting here. I was holding the baby. Dwayne was sitting in the middle. Jennifer was kind of standing behind my shoulder. And our truck, literally, it turned over, and then it popped back up. I know that I know. Nobody could make me doubt that there was an angel there that just pushed that truck back up, because we were literally mobbed, and we barely got out of town. The police came, because came to see what was going on, and the police said, you better get out of you better get out of the country before dark, or these people will kill you. We didn't do anything to anybody, but they were just, something really bad was going on there, because there was just people everywhere, and people were screaming and hollering, and it was scary. And so we not only got through town, but we got to the border. We didn't get through the border, but it was enough miles down the road. But what happened before we got as far as we did get, we were driving along, and where that truck hit us on this side, and where the truck had turned over and popped back up, it had cut the tires, the front and the back, and both the front and the back blew out. So he pulled, had to pull over because we almost turned over when both of those tires blew out, and he had to take both of the tires off. And he remembered that he had passed the little gas station back up the road, maybe 5 miles. He said, "Now, I want you all to stay in the front, keep the doors locked. You can roll the windows down part way, but don't let them down all the way." We couldn't leave the truck running, and so he walked. He rolled those tires back up the road to that station and got both of the tires fixed. Rolled them back, got them put on the truck, and we got to the border. We didn't get through the border, but we got to the border, the next border, that night, and we were able to sleep in our camper. But anyway, it took us, literally. At one point, we pulled into a camping place. I think this was in Kenya, and we parked there for a few days while he worked on the truck to make sure everything was okay. And then I can remember driving by, I think it's Mount Kilimanjaro. It's one of the tallest mountains in the world, and covered with snow. I mean, this was in Africa. It was a magnificent scene. But we drove, down through those different countries, and a young man and his wife had graduated from the same Bible school that my husband did, and they were missionaries in Malawi. So we were able to stop by there, and he was able to get the truck fixed. And anyway, we went on down to South Africa, and we continued working there for 2 more years, and then we went back to America. But anyway, I want to skip ahead real fast because I know I'm taking a lot of time. But in 1998, I was living in Arkansas, in my little hometown of Ozark, and I heard that there was a missionary that was having a meeting down the road in a little town called Coal Hill. It was maybe a 15-20-minute drive, and that I should go down and go to that meeting. So I went down there, and Brother Husto was holding a meeting, and do y'all know who Husto was? Do any of you know? Anyway, he was, his wife's name is Laura. She's been here before, and Shavana is their last name. And anyway, he was holding a meeting, and when I got to the church, that church was crammed full. They had pews, and people were just scrunched in those pews. And I was able to get in like on the very back pew. And anyway, he preached. It was wonderful. Then he prayed for some people, and then he started walking back to the back of the church. And he came all the way to the back, and he pointed at me, and he said, "Lady, would you come out here in the aisle?" And so I did. And he said, I've never seen you. I don't know who you are. But he said, I see you going to many nations. And he said, it looks like a swinging door. You go through one door and another door opens. You go through that door and another door opens. And he said, God's going to use you in a mighty way. Well, I heard after that he was going to take a group of young people up to the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico. And that spring, after school was out, and he was taking a bunch of young people, and there in that church there that I was in when he prophesied to me, there were several of the young people there that was going to go with him into Mexico, up to the Tarahumara Indians to minister. And so, anyway, I called him a few days after that, and I said, now, I'm not a young person, but I heard you're taking a bunch of young people up to, the Sierra Madre Mountains. And I said, even though I'm not a young person, I'd really like to go, and I'll help do anything that I can help do. He said, sure, come on. So I went to Rockport and joined all the people. I went with these young people. They're from Coal Hill. They flew down there, so I flew down there with them. And when we drove up to the Sierra Madre Mountains, I rode with his wife, Laura. And once we got there, I helped her. She prepared all the meals, sandwiches and all kinds of stuff like that. But anyway, I helped her. And while we were there, a young man and his wife came to me, and he said, Marianne, I'm Cass Hill, this is Sarah, and we're getting ready to go to India to teach in a 4-month Bible school. Because, see, Brother Husto had me speak there, so they heard me speak. And he said, I'd like to ask you to go over there and teach for 4 months in this Bible school. I said, sure. So I went back home, and I happened to have enough money that I had been saving up to make that trip. And anyway, it was just real quick. I had to go through a 1-month school in Tulsa to prepare me for teaching over there. And then I was getting on that plane with all of them, and I went over there, and I worked with this young man. We were in a place called Ambala, and I think y'all have met Brother Prakash. Okay. We had the school in the town where he lived. His wife was one of the students in the school. And anyway, I started working with him. And then God just started taking me all over India. And as a matter of fact, after I'd gone to India for, I went for that 4 months, and then I went back and worked with them. I worked with that ministry for 2 or 3 years, I can't remember. And then I just launched out on my own, because young people from all over India that had come to these schools, they started asking me if I would help them build a church, help them have a school, So I started having schools. I started building churches all over India. Only God knows how many young people I helped to build churches, how many schools I had. I don't even know. I don't remember. But I know that from 2000, 1998 was my first year to go there, and I went there up through 2011. But in 2007, there had been a student come and go through one of our schools, and he was from Nepal, but he was an older man. I mean, older than the other students. He was a married man, and he had gone through that school, and then he had gone back to Nepal. And so I was over there in India, and he called me one day, and he said, Marianne, well, actually, he came in 2007, went to one of my schools, and then he went back to Nepal. And then in 2011, he called me, and he said, Marianne, would you come to Nepal and help me start doing schools in Nepal? So I did. I went to Nepal, and I helped him. I have no idea how many schools we did in Nepal. I just lost track of how many there were, and God just, I mean, I don't know how I did it. I just know that lots of money passed through my hands. And I'd go to churches, they'd just dump money on me. I mean, it was just amazing. And God made a way. God knows how to make a way when there is no way. And he helped me to do that up through, that 2011. And then that pastor said, Marianne, why don't you come and start working with me in Nepal, because we're getting lots of churches and I need to do some schools. So I went into Nepal in 2011, and I worked with Brother Elliot up until 2018, I think. And him and his family had asked me to go up to the border of Tibet with them. I mean, we made this drive, and you can't imagine what those mountains are like. I mean, we went up to the border of Tibet, and it was magnificent. They went into Tibet and got groceries. They were gone for 2 or 3 hours. And I just sat there at the border and watched people go in and out. And then, we headed back down the mountain. And we had I had like 2 more months to be there in Nepal. And we came down, and we were under the shadow of Mount Everest. And I heard God speak to me. And he said, Marianne, as soon as you get back, change your ticket and go immediately back to America. And I want you to go to every state capital. I want you to drive to every state capital, including Washington, D.C. I want you to anoint every capitol door with oil and pray at the door of every capital. And as you drive across each state, pray in tongues. Well, I did. And it took me a whole year to go to every state capital. And when I finished was when the election, we were having elections, and Donald Trump was voted in the first time. And I don't know Donald Trump. I did get to shake his hand once. But I know that my going to every one of those state capitals had something to do with him getting into office the first time he went in. I know that with all my heart. And, God's just had me do strange things down through my life. And he's done things in my life and through my life that only eternity will reveal. And but I also know that I was in Arkansas at my son's, and God told me to go to Three Rivers. And the men in this church provided me a home to live in out there behind. It's a little trailer house, or I don't know what you call it, but it fits on the back of a truck. But it's plenty wonderful for me, because you wouldn't believe some of the places I've lived. I've even got a nice, comfortable bed. And I've slept on boards. I've slept on hard marble floors. So anyway, I'm thankful to be here, and I'll be here for the rest of the summer, as while they're going. The Lord. I don't know why the Lord wanted me to come down here. Well, they went to India, and to stay up till they go to Israel. I don't know what God's got for me next, but I'm 83 now. I turned 83 in March, and I don't think God's finished with me yet. I think He still has things for me to do. But I want y'all to know that I love you. You're my family, and you've been a just tremendous blessing in my life for many, many years. God bless you. So